Kashimo is a much deeper character than I think we all realize, and here's exactly why. I think based on the way that he's first introduced, he's played up as this character who simply just wants to fight a battle against Sukuna. This would lead people to generally think that he's purely a one-dimensional character centered around one single thing, being fighting, but I completely disagree with that statement. Something that's commonly talked about with Kashimo is that he was a wasted character and that his entire purpose basically meant nothing with how easily he was taken down. But it's so important to emphasize what we, the viewers, are seeing of Kashimo is only a small blip of his life. Kashimo's story is so much more than just the culling games. It's the never-ending battles, grappling with loneliness that comes with being the strongest of his era, and seeking to find a worthy opponent that he could fight to his heart's content with. In my eyes, Kashimo isn't someone who was wasted, but served to highlight the qualities, aspects, and traits of other characters in significant ways that bring out a much more multi-dimensional aspect to JJK that I find so enjoyable. But looking at Kashimo from the start, one of the first things that we see him say is where he could find Sukuna, and this not only serves to communicate his love for fighting, but his desire to understand what love truly is. If you guys remember, in chapter 236, Gojo regrets not being able to show Sukuna true love. While I didn't quite understand what he meant at the time, this love that Gojo was talking about is the same as the thrill of a good fight. He tells Geto in the airport that Sukuna wasn't going all out against him and he had much more to spare. I think the common link between the three sorcerers of their era being Kashimo, Gojo, and Sukuna is the loneliness that comes from being at the top. Think of the last time they were challenged in a fight. Think of how disconnected they felt from everyone else being so far above them, and if anyone could possibly show these three characters what it means to be loved and appreciated and seen, it would be the strongest of different generations. For Kashimo, I believe that his will to fight stems much more from trying to reach a peak that he's worked his entire life for than simply just the act of fighting itself. That's why he never cared about the points he earned during the culling games, as long as he's able to face the sorcerer he has quite literally waited centuries for. You see, Kashimo's goal was to never rise to become the absolute strongest sorcerer of all time. Deep down, I believe he simply wanted to see what the true meaning of strength is, and what better way to do that from learning it from the literal embodiment of it. And we see this realization in full form when Kashimo fights Sukuna in chapter 238 when he calls his Heian era form perfection. Sure, he's cocky enough to think that he's able to battle on par against the King of Curses, but he absolutely recognizes strength when he sees it. Automatically, this overarching goal transforms Kashimo from someone who simply just loves to fight into a character who has depth, a goal, a larger mission that he was born to accomplish, and will do whatever it takes to see it through to the end. Also, I think it's important to mention that Kashimo shares similar traits to Gojo and Sukuna in that he craves and looks down on those who aren't even remotely close to him in power. And this is a common similarity shared by the strongest because it's been alluded to through different interactions between characters that selfishness is the absolute key to growing stronger and rising to the upper echelon of the JJK power hierarchy. When Sukuna is speaking to Jogo in the afterlife, he mentions how the special grade had insane potential. He simply just didn't have the right mindset to accompany his talents. Sukuna advised that he should have burned everything down to the ground like a calamity, and he lacked the hunger to take hold of his desires. We know that cursed energy stems from negative feelings, therefore being selfish and cruel inherently, and by the very definition of the power system makes you strong. And I believe without a doubt, Kashimo absolutely falls into this mindset. What's also really interesting to point out is that when we get flashbacks of Kashimo speaking with Kenjaku back in the Edo period, we see him as an old man sitting in a field with dead bodies littered all around him. And of course this is a subtle and nuanced point, but Kashimo is an old dude, like way older than any sorcerer we have probably seen before in the series, apart from of course Kenjaku and Sukuna. It's been stated that most sorcerers die young, but clearly with Kashimo he paid the ultimate price with his natural and inherent strength, and lived a life of solitude, dying from old age, as opposed to in combat. And of course, as we know, due to his appearance in the culling game, strength alone wasn't fulfilling to Kashimo. When he faces off against Sukuna, Kashimo mentions how most people who would have fought against Sukuna in the past have done it for recognition or fame, and now wonders to himself if his opponents were the same. The difference in their battle, of course, is that Kashimo simply wants to go up against the opponent he's waited multiple lifetimes for, and it's finally here. What does it mean to go up against an opponent much stronger than yourself? And I think what perfectly encapsulates this concept is Kashimo's very own curse technique. We learn in the fight between Hikari and Kashimo that he can only use his curse technique once, and to me this just fits exactly the kind of character Kashimo is. He doesn't want a long life, he doesn't want recognition, he doesn't want to perform any cheap gimmicks. He simply wants an opponent that he can test all of his strength against, and with the drawback that his body will quite literally disintegrate as he unleashes his technique just further solidifies him as an all-out, all-or-nothing fighter. But going back to the fight with Kashimo and Sukuna, we get some interesting dialogue as the King of Curses invades Kashimo's soul/afterlife world. Sukuna tells Kashimo that he's never needed anyone to satisfy him, and this in some ways is a tragic but interesting irony. After being reborn specifically to chase another, he's told by that very same person that what he's doing was completely invalid. However, Sukuna in his own way almost associated Kashimo in the same tier as himself when he tells that others recognize us for our strength. Throughout Kashimo's journey, we see that he's learned as much about the meaning of strength as he did about what it means to love. Of course, Kashimo didn't win the fight. I don't think any of us expected him to, but he teaches us a lot more about the meaning of strength in his very short time in the series than I'd argue most characters have. In my opinion, his ending wasn't a disappointment because he ultimately received exactly what he was searching for. Kashimo's existential struggles, desires, and achievements all came to a close the moment he faced off against Sukuna, and that's what makes him such a beautiful character to me. In the short time we're exposed to this character, we catch him at the very end of his journey, but ultimately see him reach the heights of his goal and pass away fulfilled that he received love from the strongest of all time. Speaking of Kashimo, if you haven't, be sure to watch my video talking about the fight between Hikari and Kashimo and why it's the most epic fight in all of Jujutsu Kaisen. Thank you so much to the members of my channel. Your support is really appreciated. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Stay curious, anime fam. Peace.